The reason for this research is, over the years, Westerners have been engaging with extensive retreats and also daily meditation. And at present, within our tradition, we don't have any physical assessments or preparations. And it seems to be that people are really struggling, some people, not everyone, are really struggling with learning how to have the best posture for themselves, how to develop posture, and how to work with problems that arise when we're doing extensive sitting. So that's what the research has looked into. So to conduct the research, first of all, I really discussed a lot with both Western teachers and Eastern teachers of meditation, also yoga teachers and meditation teachers. I then conducted an online survey of 43 people from 5 countries who filled out a questionnaire. And then I worked with 15 people. All of these have done at least 3 years retreat. And I worked with them. First of all, I assessed their sitting position. I assessed their breath work. And based on this, developed a personal yoga practice which they had to do at least 4 to 5 times for each week, and did it for a month. And at the end of that month, then I assessed them, and they completed a questionnaire. I have to say, it was clear to me, people who have done retreat don't necessarily have better posture, and also it was very clear that they had not had their postural breath work assessed before going into retreats.
Those entering retreat is a lot different than what was going on in Tibet or Nepal in India, because the retreats are still occurring in India and Nepal. And basically there's a lot of Westerners who are in their 40s entering retreat, so it's quite a different age range. The research shows that the main problems are in the lower back, hip and knees. And that, in a way, that's quite obvious. But what that means is then that you would give preparation and the therapeutics for those particular areas. The research shows that 68% of retreaters had physical problems within the retreats, and 55% of those people had no help or assistance. So that's over half of them had no help or assistance in how to work with those difficulties. For those, the 45 that did have help or assistance, it was that a therapist was allowed in, or the retreater was allowed out, or it also showed that some people quietly had people who knew yoga and they would help them discreetly within the retreats. Unfortunate result was it showed in the online research that 27% of the damage that was done, physical damage, was permanent, that it didn't get better after a retreat. So that means that 27% of people are being physically permanently damaged. Then it's a changing picture, but I'm just saying from this particular research, 11% of the difficulties did get better after 3 years. And from the online survey, 68% felt the preparation for using yoga would be beneficial. And of the 15 people I worked with who did, I looked at them, assessed, gave them a yoga practice for a month, they had to do it at least 4 times a week, 4 or 5 times a week. Then 100% of the participants thought it would be very useful, and they had found it beneficial. Then I noticed there were some observations. In the people I assessed, again I couldn't see this online, but in the people I assessed and looked at, in all except one person, their pelvis alignment was not even on both sides. And this was always that the right side was more open, and that's because people are putting their right leg on the outside, and then it's being lifted up. And from a yogic, all I can say about this, because it's interesting, in the different Buddhist traditions, different people or different traditions do different things with their legs. So in our tradition, the right leg always goes on the outside, then up. In the Zen tradition, they always put the left and up. There's some of the, for instance, in the pre-Buddhist Bon tradition, then some of the teachers are teaching that you ladies do one side and men do the other way. And so there are different things. That I don't want to comment on, but definitely from the yogic perspective, this creates an imbalance if the hip is getting more open than the other side. Interestingly, the right side is connected with heat and a more challenging side. So actually you wouldn't want to overstimulate this side. So from a yogic perspective, in your practice, if you're instructed you always have to have the right leg up, then when you're out of your formal practice, then you would put the left up. But in yoga, we would always put one up, then change the other up, because of what it's doing in the pelvis, and what's happening in the pelvis is also affecting the subtle body in the channels.
Another point that's evident is men and female practitioners who go into retreat might face different challenges because of the different structure of the pelvis. Female pelvises have more space and are less solid. This means that they can be more prone to instability. So the yoga exercise they would do, or the movement or the muscle work, would be to really develop and encourage strengthening and support. And for instance, using a meditation belt that goes round can be very, very supportive. There also can be the challenges for the male pelvis, that it's more rigid and structured. So for people who haven't grown up sitting cross-legged, and that's most Western men, they might have more challenges in opening the hips and bringing the legs down, in which case the yoga practice would be focused on hip opening and releasing and helping with them that way. This is an overgeneralization, but the bottom line is that not everyone is the same. And just to say that women and men are the same when it comes to how they're trained and how they're prepared, maybe we're missing something. Many Tibetan Buddhist practitioners also practice yoga, but their practice is there's their yoga and there's their meditation practice. And what is interesting is when I did some research into the history of yoga and some of the yogic texts that you see, then we can clearly see that in the Mahasiddha time in India, that yoga was not a religious practice, and that yoga was practiced by different people from different philosophical and religious traditions.
The word yoga is an old Indo-European word meaning to yoke. In different contexts, the word yoga can mean very different things. For instance, how the term would be used in, say, tantric traditions is different from how we would use it, for instance, in the 4 yogas of Mahamudra. It's really important that the word yoga should be clarified in the context it's used. Here, we're looking into a body of practices using breathwork, posture and mental focus, and they have their roots within the Indian Hatha yogic tradition and their therapeutic applications within the Indian Ayurvedic tradition.
Back in the medieval time, we're really talking about the time of the Mahasiddhas. And the Mahasiddhas, the 84 Mahasiddhas, we can see come from very different backgrounds. And there's 2 quite interesting examples that show this. For instance, here we have a picture of Krishnamacharya Kana, who's a Mahasiddha. and he's in the Buddhist lineage as far as he's one of the human teachers to do with Tilopa. And yet Kana was also and is also a great Adinath in the Nath tradition. It's quite difficult not to talk about the Naths when we're talking about Hatha yoga techniques, because they were so much involved with the Hatha techniques and the tantric techniques of that time. But you can see that the Naths aren't necessarily all from one tradition. Another example where we can see that there's this sort of non-sectarian side going on in the medieval tradition. Again, if we look at this picture here of Virupa, he is attributed to this text, the Amrita Siddhi. This text, Amrita Siddhi, appears to be the first extensive text on Hatha yoga techniques, and it's been quite interesting as far as there's a huge project, 5-year project going on in SOAS with Sanskrit scholars looking at the history of yoga, and Jim Mallinson has found that this text attributed to Virupa really was written down by Buddhists at that time, which is quite surprising. So we can see that different groups of yogis and ascetics were practicing similar practices.
Assessments. Meditation instructors should have an understanding of breath patterns, how to assess someone's breath, and how to help people understand their breath patterns and to work with their breath, particularly if they've got unhealthy breath patterns. Instructors should also have an understanding of assessing seated posture, which can be done by using a phone, and how to make corrections if they're needed, and also how to include this within their yogic preparation practice. Posture. Instructors should know how to support practitioners to be in the most appropriate posture for their practice. Also, how to align their body externally, but also internally through sensation and breath. Also, how to maintain a clear but relaxed posture, and how to develop more advanced seated postures if they want to without forcing or damaging themselves. Yogic preparation. Not everyone needs to do this kind of practice at all. And also practices can really vary. It could be very complex, or it could be very simple, working with 1 or 2 postures, with breath work and with focus. When we do yogic preparation, the practice starts with intelligent listening. Listening to the 4 parts of the breath. The inhale, top of the inhale, the exhale, and after the exhale is finished. These 4 parts of the breath tell us a lot. We listen to whether our breath is smooth or rapid, whether the inhale, the exhale is even. Many things the breath tells us. And once we've listened, then we will start really connecting with our breath, breathing properly, using the victorious breath of Ujjayi, and then movement comes after that. We start breathing and then moving, having the mind also totally aware of what we're doing. Although these practices can be offered in a group setting of a general sequence, generally it's taught that yoga should fit the individual and not the individual try to fit the yoga. So practice should be individualized as soon as possible if it's within a group, and individual work is very much encouraged. Relaxation and constructive rest pose. Many people come to meditation mistakenly thinking that it's a relaxation practice. The constructive rest pose that you see here, where you carefully build up support for the back and it keeps the heart open, is very supportive for people learning how to relax, and also for people when they find that they're not well enough to sit up. If the heart area is supported and open, we're much less likely to go into a dull, sleepy state, which can happen when we just lay down.